On November 6, 2014, a gruesome discovery shook Mexico City. Police were alerted to human remains found in a vacant lot near the outskirts of the capital. It was part of a torso, mangled, unrecognizable. Just days later, authorities recovered additional body parts. Arms and legs dumped in various areas around the city. But what horrified investigators most was a chilling detail. Every single finger had been removed. It didn't take long for authorities to realize they were dealing with something sinister. The level of brutality suggested a highly dangerous individual, perhaps even a serial killer, was on the loose. Panic swept across the city. Law enforcement mobilized rapidly, setting up patrols, assembling search teams, and scouring neighborhoods in a desperate attempt to locate the missing pieces of the body, especially the head and fingers. Despite their efforts, neither was ever found. Still, forensic teams managed to confirm that the dismembered parts belonged to a single victim. But with no fingerprints and no dental records, identification was impossible. Whoever this person was, they had been erased. The investigation soon led to a figure hidden behind an image of beauty, intelligence, and prestige. Her name was Alejandra Lafuente. She was a striking woman, tall, elegant, with gleaming dark hair, deep brown eyes, and lashes like strokes of ink. She possessed a figure sculpted by daily fitness routines, yoga, and breathing exercises. Alejandra exuded self-assurance and never missed a chance to pamper herself, frequently visiting salons, spas, and tanning centers. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who saw herself as flawless, an ideal of female beauty. But beauty wasn't her only strength. Alejandra came from an esteemed background. Her father, Dr. Alberto Dente, was a renowned psychiatrist, an expert on schizophrenia and manic disorders. His reputation was built not only on academic prowess but also on his controversial experiments involving patients. Alejandra idolized him. Determined to match his legacy, she enrolled in one of the country's most respected universities, pursuing a degree in psychiatry and graduating with honors. Her intelligence, persistence, and her father's influence allowed her to build a promising future. She even defended a thesis on manic syndrome, an achievement that set her apart. Yet Alejandra's path diverged from her father's. Rather than delve into academic psychiatry, she chose psychotherapy. With financial help from her father, she opened a private office in an upscale business district of Mexico City. Her practice catered exclusively to women, clients struggling with body image, depression, failed relationships, and lingering emotional trauma. Her sessions focused on rebuilding self-worth and navigating family conflicts. But while she helped other women untangle their personal lives, her own was unraveling. Alejandra's first marriage had ended, though it produced 2 daughters, both charming, with their mother's eyes and their father's wit. The separation hadn't embittered her. If anything, she remained hopeful about love and was determined not to let motherhood eclipse her personal aspirations. She continued to chase the dream of a lasting relationship, one that could give her daughters the father figure they deserved. Her ex-husband, whose name was withheld from the public, maintained regular contact with the children. On weekends, he would visit the family home to spend time with the girls and assist Alejandra with errands or housework. It was a routine arrangement, cordial, respectful, and seemingly safe. But on one particular visit, everything changed. That day, Alejandra asked her ex-husband to enter through the backyard, claiming the front door's lock had jammed. Trusting her without hesitation, he circled the house and stepped inside. She then told him that their youngest daughter was taking a bath and asked if he could check on her. The house was unnervingly quiet. No sound of children's cartoons, no laughter, no running water. As he made his way to the bathroom, something felt off. When he opened the door, the scene stopped him cold. There was no child in the tub, only water and silence. Tape lay strewn across the floor. It was in that moment that a dark realization began to take shape. Something was very, very wrong. She was standing right behind him. Without a word, Alejandra raised a hammer high above her head and brought it down with brutal force. The first blow struck his skull with a sickening crunch, then came a second. Blood gushed from the gaping wound, splattering across the walls and floor. It was a scene of unimaginable violence. According to forensic experts, he never had a chance. Death had come almost instantly from the first strike. But the horror didn't end there. Alejandra's eldest daughter, who had unexpectedly returned early from visiting a friend, walked through the door just moments later. What she saw was something no child should ever witness. Her father, lifeless and bloodied, lying motionless in a pool of red. The image would be seared into her memory forever. This wasn't the first sign of trouble in Alejandra's life. The couple's relationship had always been volatile. Friends had observed bruises and scratches on the man's arms and neck. They recalled Alejandra's unpredictable mood swings and violent outbursts, both at home and in public. She was known to lash out at her husband, even striking him in front of others. Her erratic behavior didn't go unnoticed by those who lived nearby. Neighbors regularly heard shouting, angry tirades, and strange episodes of uncontrolled rage. But this time, it had spiraled far beyond anything they'd seen before. Panicked and trembling, the young girl ran from the house, screaming for help. A neighbor heard her cries and rushed over, quickly realizing the gravity of the situation. The police were called immediately. Alejandra was arrested on the spot and charged with murder. She was taken to the station and placed in a holding cell, where she awaited her initial court appearance. Her fate was now in the hands of the justice system. During her trial, Alejandra denied the accusations. Her attorneys claimed she had acted in self-defense. According to their narrative, her ex-husband had long harbored obsessive jealousy, accusing her of bringing men into the house and warning that it could harm their daughters. On the day of the incident, they said, he had shown up unexpectedly, sneaking in through the back door in a rage, hoping to catch her with someone else. A confrontation erupted in the bathroom, where Alejandra had been assembling a nightstand. Feeling threatened, she struck him twice in the back of the head to protect herself. The court weighed the arguments. On June 14, 2012, the verdict was delivered. Taking into account her claims of self-defense, her clean record, and the fact that she was raising 2 minor children, Alejandra received a sentence of just 1 year and 4 months. But even that time would never be served. Thanks to her father's wealth and a skilled legal team, the prison term was commuted to a suspended sentence. It wasn't over. A few months later, an appeal was filed to have the charges dismissed entirely. Her legal team pushed the narrative of self-defense harder than ever. Human rights advocates joined in, demanding a jury trial and portraying Alejandra as a victim of domestic violence. A woman trapped in a cycle of emotional abuse who had finally defended herself. In the end, the court agreed to review the case once more. And this time, Alejandra walked free, completely acquitted of all charges. After her release, she resumed her practice as a therapist, continuing to offer psychological counseling to women in need. But now, she had transformed her image. She styled herself as a survivor of gender injustice, a woman who had overcome a system stacked against her and emerged stronger. It was a story that resonated deeply with many women across North America. Business boomed. Not long after her acquittal, Alejandra's life took another turn. She met a man named Alan Carrera Qua, a powerful businessman from a prominent Mexican family. He was tall, imposing, and charismatic, the son of Adrian Carrera Francis, a former high-ranking official in Mexico's special services. Adrian had built a formidable career, but it had ended in disgrace when a financial scandal involving his son came to light. Despite the fallout, Alan thrived. He expanded the family business into a nationwide chain of construction supply stores. But not all of it was legal. Behind the curtain, a darker side to his empire existed, one few dared speak about. Alan had deep ties to organized crime. He held a stake in a criminal syndicate responsible for trafficking psychotropic substances across the U.S.-Mexico border. Their operations were based in a small border town, protected by corrupt police who were paid handsomely to look the other way. This criminal network controlled a slice of the drug trade in the region and had grown into a powerful, well-oiled machine. His father Adrian, once a celebrated public servant, had been implicated in his son's criminal dealings. Pressured by investigators, he eventually agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. Facing a 20-year prison sentence, Adrian entered the Witness Protection Program and was released early. From that moment on, he dedicated himself to helping Alan grow the family's legitimate business. The son, meanwhile, was quickly learning from the father and absorbing far more than just how to run a company. After graduating from college, Alan Carrera made a decisive choice. He would walk the path his father once paved. He stepped into the world of entrepreneurship, opening a home appliance store. It wasn't as vast or powerful as his father's enterprises, but it was his, and it turned a steady profit. Despite his youth, Alan ran the business with complete independence and focus. Alan had never lacked attention from women, but from childhood, there had only been one woman who truly held his heart, his high school classmate. She was smart, graceful, and came from a respected family. The two eventually married, and for a time, it was everything Alan had ever wanted. They had a daughter together, a beautiful little girl. But Alan's ambition consumed him. He was rarely home, always buried in work. The long hours and growing emotional distance wore the marriage down. Eventually, it crumbled. The divorce devastated him. The separation from his first love left Alan in a dark place. He found no joy in new relationships. His loneliness grew heavier by the day, and soon, it pulled him into a dangerous spiral. Alan turned to alcohol to numb the pain. At first, it was occasional, but slowly, it took hold of him. He tried everything to pull himself out. Self-help books, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, detox programs. But nothing worked until he found himself in the office of a respected psychiatrist, Dr. Alberto Dente. Dr. Dente was a name known across the country, a leading expert in mental health. But to Alejandra, he was simply father. At the time, Alan's ex-wife was also struggling to process the divorce. In an effort to find peace of her own, she decided to see a therapist. Coincidentally, she reached out to the same psychiatrist who was treating Alan. Dr. Dente explained that he couldn't ethically treat both of them, as it posed a professional conflict. So, instead, he referred her to another specialist, Alejandra Lafuente, without disclosing that she was his daughter. It didn't take long for Alejandra to recognize the situation for what it was. She quickly pieced together that her new patient's ex-husband was Alan Carrera. Wealthy, attractive, and emotionally vulnerable, he was the kind of man who could easily be molded into a partner, and perhaps more. She suggested that the client bring her ex-husband in for a session, claiming she could help dissolve any lingering emotional ties between them in just one meeting. From the moment Alan stepped into Alejandra's office, her plan was in motion. She began charming him immediately, subtly, but deliberately. By the end of the session, Alan was captivated. He invited her out for coffee to continue the conversation under more casual circumstances. Alejandra hesitated at first, citing medical ethics. But it was a brief hesitation. That same evening, the two met again, and a romance was born. Their relationship intensified quickly. Word eventually reached Alan's ex-wife. She was stunned, outraged. She even considered filing a formal complaint against Alejandra for breaching professional ethics. But Alejandra, ever the skilled manipulator, turned the tables. She reassured her client that these feelings stemmed from jealousy and unresolved emotional attachments. Letting go, she insisted, was the only path to true healing. In the end, the ex-wife dropped the matter and ceased therapy altogether. Meanwhile, Alan and Alejandra's bond grew stronger. Just a few months after their first date, they moved in together. 2 months after that, they were planning a wedding. But Alan had no idea who he was really marrying. No clue of the secrets she had buried or the violent past she had left behind. In April 2014, Alan flew out to visit his parents. It was a perfect moment to share his big news. He was engaged. But the announcement caught his family completely off guard. They had never even heard of Alejandra. To them, she was a total stranger. It was an odd detail that left them uneasy. Just a week after returning from that visit, the couple made it official. The marriage was quietly registered, without a traditional ceremony. Alejandra requested that no friends or family be invited. She cited budget constraints and a desire for something simple. Alan went along with it. But despite the secrecy, one guest did attend, Alejandra's father, Dr. Alberto Dente. In the beginning, their married life resembled a dream. Young, passionate, full of plans and ambition, they seemed like a perfect match. But it didn't take long for cracks to form. Alejandra's carefully curated image began to unravel. Behind closed doors, her temperament turned volatile. The emotional instability she once masked with charm and poise began surfacing with increasing frequency. The fairy tale was coming apart, and Alan had no idea just how dark things were about to get. No one saw it coming. No one could have imagined the horror brewing behind the closed doors of Alan and Alejandra's home. The mask of a fairy tale was slipping, and what lay beneath was something unspeakable. From the outside, Alan kept his life private. He was discreet, rarely sharing personal matters even with his closest friends. That made it all the more difficult to detect the unraveling of his marriage. But cracks had formed, deep, dangerous ones. Alan's once warm demeanor had faded, and after his wedding, he pulled away from his family altogether. The final blow came when he didn't invite his parents to the ceremony. After that, the calls stopped. The silence became permanent. Alan's remaining friends began to notice changes in his new wife. Alejandra had grown increasingly erratic. She seemed always on edge, irritable, volatile, unpredictable. At social events, her outbursts embarrassed Alan, who eventually began declining invitations altogether, ashamed of what might happen next. Behind closed doors, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Fights erupted almost daily, often over trivial matters. There was no peace in that home, only escalating conflict and cold distance. One night, Alejandra claimed she went through Alan's phone. What she found, according to her testimony, pushed her over the edge. Intimate messages, flirtations with other women, graphic exchanges. It was, in her words, the breaking point. She told the court that her husband had been abusive, physically, emotionally, verbally, and now, unfaithful. There was no marriage left to save. But what happened next didn't involve therapy or counseling or even a conversation. Alejandra made a choice. She decided Alan had to die. And just like before, she began planning his murder, not in rage but with calculated coldness. She knew exactly how she would do it. Alan, oblivious to the darkness building in his own home, carried on with his life as usual. He still kept his distance from his family but knew he couldn't miss one important event, the annual celebration of his grandfather's birthday, a tradition he had honored every year. He attended the party, spoke with family, and before leaving, sent a final message. A simple text to let them know he'd arrived home safely. That was the last time anyone heard from Alan Carrera. He missed work the next day, then the next. That was unheard of. Alan was deeply committed to his business, especially with the grand opening of a new store on the horizon. His absence wasn't just strange, it was alarming. The truth was far worse than anyone could have imagined. According to later investigations, Alan returned home that night unaware he was walking into a death trap. Another argument broke out, one of many, but this time, Alejandra had already made up her mind. There would be no turning back. That evening, she laced the glass of milk Alan drank nightly with a powerful sleeping pill. He swallowed it, none the wiser. When he fell asleep, Alejandra moved in. She took a pillow and pressed it over his face. He stirred, fought. His hands tried to grip the pillow to claw his way back to air, but the drug had already weakened him. His resistance faded with each labored breath. Alejandra watched as her husband slowly, helplessly, suffocated. Then came the hardest part, the body. She hadn't planned that far. Alan's body was too heavy to move. She didn't have the tools, the strength, or the time. Panic set in, but she was determined. Alejandra crossed into her neighbor's yard and stole an electric saw from the garden shed. Returning home, she began the gruesome task of dismemberment. Piece by piece, she carved his body apart, methodically, emotionlessly. It was the act of a sadist. She removed his fingers, pulled out his teeth. Any clue that could be used to identify him had to disappear. The remains were placed into garbage bags, then stuffed into suitcases. Her plan was to dispose of the body quietly, unnoticed. But things didn't go as smoothly as she had hoped. As dawn crept over the neighborhood, Alejandra tried to slip out of the house with one of the suitcases. But she wasn't alone. From behind a curtain, an elderly neighbor, sleepless and restless, watched through her window. She saw Alejandra struggling with the luggage, clearly flustered, and at such an odd hour. Something didn't feel right, and she wasn't the only one who would start asking questions. The old woman watching from her window grew more suspicious with every passing moment. Alejandra's behavior didn't sit right. She moved erratically, always looking over her shoulder, glancing nervously down the street. She was struggling with heavy suitcases, yet her husband, usually the one seen handling such things, was nowhere in sight. When Alejandra returned home again just after dawn, it struck the neighbor as even more bizarre. What no one knew then was that Alejandra had just scattered the dismembered remains of her husband across several neighborhoods in Mexico City, carefully choosing distant locations to avoid detection. She believed that by spreading the body parts far and wide, she would outsmart the authorities. Then, she went about her day as if nothing had happened. But the horror could not remain hidden for long. On November 6, 2014, police made a gruesome discovery. A human torso, stripped of any identifying features. The fingers were gone. The teeth had been removed. It was an act of pure savagery. The news sent shockwaves through the capital. The following day, other parts of the body were discovered in different districts, each location far from the next. That detail, how widely the remains were scattered, later became a crucial piece of evidence. It explained Alejandra's extended absence that morning and confirmed what investigators feared. This was no random crime. It had been planned. The body parts were sent to a top forensic lab. Experts quickly determined they belonged to the same individual. But without fingerprints or dental records, the identity of the victim was still a mystery. Desperate to deflect suspicion, Alejandra took an even riskier step. She began sending messages to Alan's family, pretending to be him. She told them that he and Alejandra were going on vacation and would be out of contact for a while. But her plan backfired. She didn't know that Alan had grown distant from his relatives and hadn't spoken to them in some time. Her sudden outreach was suspicious. What truly unraveled everything was a phone call. Dr. Alberto Dente, Alejandra's father, began contacting Alan's family. He hadn't heard from his daughter and was growing concerned. She had missed counseling sessions, and some of his patients were getting anxious. He first called to ask if Alan's relatives had heard from the couple. When they said no, he made a second call, this time with a strange story. He claimed Alejandra had been found in a state of psychological distress and was admitted to a clinic. The cause, he said, was depression brought on by Alan's infidelity. That call set off alarms. Alarmed and confused, Alan's family began searching for him, but no one could find him. Eventually, they turned to the police. Investigators moved quickly. Forensic experts compared the recently discovered remains with Alan Carrera's known physical characteristics. The match was exact. His identity was confirmed with absolute certainty. The news shattered his family. His grandfather, devastated by the loss of his only grandson, fell ill shortly after the confirmation. Police obtained a search warrant and descended upon Alan's home and office. In the backyard, they found a patch of disturbed earth. Beneath it, they uncovered a horrifying sight. His fingers and teeth, buried in the soil. The find shook the city. Alejandra was arrested immediately. Blood was found in the house, in one of the rooms, in the garage, and in the trunk of her vehicle. The evidence was overwhelming. Still, Alejandra denied everything. She clung to the hope that, like before, she could slip through the cracks of the justice system. But this time, justice held firm. The testimony of the elderly neighbor played a key role. Her account matched the estimated time of Alan's death. Investigators also discovered that Alejandra had used her professional license to obtain a powerful sleeping medication, one not available without medical authority. That detail alone sealed her fate. Security camera footage added another nail to the coffin. Alan was seen entering the home. He was never seen leaving. Later, the same cameras captured Alejandra hauling suitcases out of the house. On December 10, 2014, the jury delivered its verdict. Maria Alejandra Lafuente was sentenced to life in prison. The charges: premeditated murder with exceptional cruelty, concealment of a crime, and abuse of professional authority. Her fall from grace was complete. Even her father, once revered in the world of psychiatry, couldn't save her. He used his influence, money, and connections to try and suppress the trial's visibility, succeeding only in keeping the proceedings closed to the public and press. But no legal maneuver could shield his reputation. The man who built his career diagnosing and treating mental illness had failed to see the darkness in his own home. The woman he raised, praised, and protected had become a monster, one he never saw coming. In the aftermath of her conviction, questions from the past began to resurface, dark questions that had never been fully answered. The mysterious death of Alejandra's first husband was brought back into the spotlight. Though no charges had ever been filed at the time, the brutality and precision of Alan Carrera's murder forced authorities to re-examine the earlier case. But too many years had passed. The evidence was gone. Witnesses had moved on. Time had obscured the truth. No direct link could be established. Still, suspicion lingered. Some investigators began to look deeper into Alejandra's background, into the influence of her father, Dr. Alberto Dente. Whispers began to circulate. Had he been involved? Had father and daughter, under the guise of scientific inquiry, crossed a moral line together? The theory suggested that Alejandra's crimes weren't just acts of rage, but cold, calculated experiments. Crimes committed for study. But even that dark possibility couldn't be proven. No evidence surfaced that tied Dr. Dente directly to the murders. The suspicion, no matter how strong, remained just that, suspicion. Then came a shocking turn in the case. After multiple appeals from the victim's family, fueled by public outcry and the extraordinary cruelty of the crime, the court took an unprecedented step. Alejandra's sentence was changed from life imprisonment to death. It was a rare ruling in modern Mexico. Capital punishment had fallen into disuse in recent decades, and this kind of sentence had become almost unheard of. But in this case, the court found it justified. The brutality of the murder, the manipulation, the abuse of professional authority, it all culminated in a punishment that left no room for appeal. The law also mandated that all of Alejandra's property, her house, assets, possessions, be handed over to the family of the victim. But what comfort could that bring? What compensation could ever undo the horror of what had been done? Alan Carrera was gone. No ruling, no property, no sentence could ever bring him back. Alejandra had revealed herself to be cold, ruthless, and calculated. Despite psychological assessments that declared her sane, there was no doubt she suffered from deep, untreated mental illness. She had been shaped by the influence of her father, empowered by her status, and emboldened by the lack of consequences after her first crime. The system had failed once, and that failure cost a man his life. Had justice been served the first time, perhaps Alan would still be alive. But now it was far too late.